He was invisible. For 3 years, Marcus Cole cleaned the floors of Sterling Financial Tower while executives walked past him like he didn't exist. He raised his son alone. He worked nights. He never complained. Then one day, someone told him a woman had noticed him, that she wanted to meet him for dinner at the finest restaurant in the city. He believed it. What happened next was a humiliation so public, so cruel, that most men would have crumbled. But Marcus didn't crumble. And the one person who saw his dignity in that moment, the CEO's billionaire daughter, made a decision that would turn his invisible life into a headline. She looked at her powerful father and said, "I want him." And she meant it. Not the executives, not the millionaires, the janitor. This is the story of how a prank meant to destroy a good man accidentally gave him everything. Before we continue, please share with us where you're watching from. Tell us your city or region in the comments. I'm happy to see that you're part of this community. May God bless you and your loved ones. Now, let's begin. The elevator doors slid open at 6:47 p.m., and Marcus Cole stepped into the marble lobby of Sterling Financial Tower. His gray janitor's uniform was freshly pressed, his work boots polished, despite the scuffs that wouldn't come out. He carried a brown paper bag in one hand, leftover mac and cheese from dinner with Nolan, and a quiet dignity that most people never bothered to notice. At 33 years old, Marcus had learned that invisibility wasn't always a curse. Sometimes it was protection. "Evening, Marcus," said Hector, the elderly security guard at the front desk. "Evening, Hector. How's your knee?" Hector smiled, rubbing his leg. "Better since you told me about that heating pad. Loretta sends her thanks." Marcus nodded warmly. "Tell her I said hello." He walked toward the supply closet, passing the massive portrait of Victor Sterling, CEO and founder of Sterling Financial. The man's eyes seemed to follow everyone, cold and calculating, even in oil paint. Marcus didn't linger. He had work to do. For the next 6 hours, he moved through the building like a ghost, emptying trash bins on the 14th floor where the young brokers worked late, mopping the executive hallway on 42, polishing the glass conference room where million-dollar deals were signed daily. No one said thank you. No one said anything at all. But Marcus didn't mind. He wasn't working for gratitude. He was working for Nolan. His 5-year-old son was everything, the reason Marcus woke up, the reason he kept going. 3 years ago, when cancer took Nolan's mother, Marcus had made a silent promise at her graveside. "I'll give him the world, even if I have to build it with my bare hands." At 2 a.m., Marcus clocked out and walked 4 blocks to the bus stop. The city was quiet, the streets empty, except for the occasional taxi. He rode 17 stops to a modest apartment complex in the Montclair neighborhood. Inside Unit 4B, his elderly neighbor, Mrs. Delgado, was asleep on the couch, the TV flickering softly. On the floor beside her, wrapped in a dinosaur blanket, was Nolan. Marcus crouched down, brushing hair from his son's forehead. The boy stirred. "Daddy? Hey, buddy, I'm home." Nolan's sleepy eyes opened. "Did you fight any dragons tonight?" Marcus smiled. Every night he told Nolan that his job was protecting a magical castle from invisible dragons. It made the long absences easier. "2 big ones," Marcus whispered, "but I won." Nolan grinned, then closed his eyes. "My daddy's a hero." Marcus lifted him gently, carried him to the small bedroom they shared, and tucked him into the race car bed Marcus had built from scrap wood and patience. He stood in the doorway, watching his son breathe. "A hero," he thought. "I'm just trying to be enough."
The next morning, Marcus made pancakes shaped like stars, walked Nolan to kindergarten, and kissed him goodbye at the gate. "Love you, Dad," Nolan called over his shoulder. "Love you more, buddy." Marcus watched until Nolan disappeared inside, then turned and walked toward the bus stop. Another day, another shift, another invisible night. But what Marcus Cole didn't know was that his invisible life was about to be seen by people who wanted to mock him and by one person who would change everything.
On the 14th floor of Sterling Financial Tower, 3 young brokers gathered around a desk after hours, laughing over expensive whiskey and bad ideas. Garrett Nash was the ringleader, 28 years old, slick hair, designer suits, and a smile that never reached his eyes. Beside him sat Devin Price and Tyler Mack, both eager to impress, both cruel in the way people become when they've never been told no. "You see the janitor tonight?" Garrett asked, swirling his glass. "Same uniform, same shoes, same sad little wave when he empties the trash." Devin snorted. "I heard he's got a kid. Imagine growing up with a dad who mops floors for a living." "Pathetic," Tyler added. Garrett leaned back, grinning. "You know what would be hilarious? Let's set him up." "Set him up how?" "A blind date," Garrett said slowly, savoring the idea. "We tell him some mystery woman saw him in the building and requested dinner with him, somewhere fancy, somewhere he clearly doesn't belong." Devin's eyes lit up. "And when he shows up?" "She takes one look at him and walks out. We'll have someone there to record the whole thing." They laughed, clinking glasses. The next evening, Garrett waited near the supply closet, leaning casually against the wall, when Marcus emerged with his mop and bucket. "Hey, Marcus, right?" Marcus looked up, surprised. No one from the 14th floor had ever spoken to him. "That's me." Garrett smiled warmly. "Listen, this is kind of awkward, but there's this company appreciation thing happening. Random employees get nominated for a nice dinner, totally anonymous. Someone put your name in." "Someone nominated me?" "Apparently you made an impression on someone, a woman actually. She requested you specifically. It's this Saturday at Carmichael's downtown. Everything's paid for." "Carmichael's? That's a really nice place." "You deserve it, man. You work hard." Garrett patted his shoulder. "Just show up at 8. She'll meet you there." Marcus hesitated. His first instinct was suspicion. When had anything good ever fallen into his lap? But then he thought of Nolan, of the bedtime prayers where his son asked God to send Daddy someone special so he wouldn't be lonely anymore. Maybe this was the universe answering. "Okay," Marcus said quietly. "I'll be there." Garrett grinned. "Perfect. She'll be wearing a red dress. You can't miss her." As Marcus walked away, Garrett turned to Devin and Tyler, who had been watching from a distance. "Saturday night. This is going to be beautiful." On Saturday morning, Marcus stood in front of his closet, if you could call it that, a small rack in the corner of his bedroom, holding work uniforms, 2 pairs of jeans, and 1 blazer he'd bought at Goodwill for his wife's funeral. He pulled out the blazer, inspected it. Navy blue, slightly faded, a loose thread on the cuff. But it was all he had. Nolan sat on the bed, watching. "Where are you going, Daddy?" "Daddy has a meeting with someone special tonight." "A princess?" "Maybe." Nolan's face lit up. "I hope she's nice. I hope she likes dinosaurs." Marcus killed Nell, looking into his son's eyes. "If she's anything good, buddy, she'll love dinosaurs." That evening, Marcus kissed Nolan goodbye, left him with Mrs. Delgado, and walked toward the bus stop in his thrift store blazer and cleanest shoes. His heart pounded with something he hadn't felt in years. Hope. But what happens when hope walks into a trap?
Carmichael's was everything Marcus expected and feared. Crystal chandeliers dripped light onto white tablecloths. Waiters glided silently with silver trays. The air smelled like money and exclusion. Marcus stood at the entrance, tugging at his blazer, suddenly aware of every frayed thread and faded seam. "Reservation?" the host asked, eyebrow raised. Yes, Cole, Marcus Cole." The host scanned the list, then smiled thinly. "Right this way, sir." Marcus followed, each step feeling heavier. He was led to a small table near the window, elegant and isolated. He sat down, hands clasped, heart racing. The menu was incomprehensible. Prices weren't listed. He didn't touch anything. 15 minutes passed, then 20. At 8:27 p.m., she arrived. She was stunning. Tall, dark hair, a red dress that fit like it was painted on. She walked toward his table with confidence, heels clicking against the marble. Marcus stood, smiling nervously. But she stopped 3 feet away. Her eyes moved slowly over him, the faded blazer, the scuffed shoes, the Goodwill tie he'd added last minute. Her lip curled. "You're the guy?" she asked, voice flat. "I'm Marcus. Yeah, no," she laughed, loud enough for nearby tables to hear. "I don't know who set this up, but this isn't happening." Marcus's face flushed. "I'm sorry, you thought wrong." She was already turning. "Good luck, though, seriously." And then she was gone, heels clicking away, leaving Marcus standing alone in a room full of whispers. He sank slowly into his chair. His chest tightened, his eyes stung. He could feel people watching, judging, laughing behind their napkins. For 5 seconds he sat completely still. Just 5 seconds, but it felt like the world had collapsed inward. Then he exhaled. He didn't storm out, he didn't make a scene. He simply sat back, rested his hands on the table, and looked out the window. The waiter approached carefully. "Sir, would you still like to order?" Marcus nodded slowly. "Yeah, just the soup, whatever's simple." The waiter walked away, and Marcus sat alone, humiliated but unbroken. He thought about Nolan, about the promise he'd made at his wife's grave. Dignity, always dignity. He didn't notice the woman watching from across the room. She sat alone at a corner table, blonde hair pulled back, a gray silk blouse, a face that magazines had photographed but never really captured. Her name was Adrian Sterling, and she was supposed to be here for a business dinner that canceled last minute. But she hadn't left. She had watched the whole thing unfold. She saw the nervous hope in his eyes when he stood to greet the woman. She saw the cruelty in the rejection, public and unnecessary. She saw him sit back down, not with shame, but with quiet resolve. And something stirred inside her, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Adrian picked up her wine glass, stood, and walked across the restaurant. She stopped at his table. "Mind if I sit down?" Marcus looked up, confused. "I'm sorry?" She smiled softly, pulling out the chair across from him. "I saw what happened, and honestly, she's an idiot." Before Marcus could respond, she extended her hand. "I'm Adrian." And this is the moment. Everything changed.
Marcus stared at the woman across from him, certain he had misheard. "You want to sit here?" he asked. "With me?" Adrian smiled, settling into the chair, unless that seat's reserved for someone else. He almost laughed. No, it's definitely not." She flagged down the waiter with the kind of easy authority that comes from a lifetime of being noticed. "2 glasses of your house red, please, and the mushroom risotto, twice. Unless," she looked at Marcus, "you're not vegetarian, are you?" "No, ma'am, I eat pretty much anything." "Then risotto it is." The waiter nodded and disappeared. Marcus fidgeted with his napkin. "Look, I appreciate this, but you really don't have to." "I know I don't have to," Adrian interrupted gently. "I want to. There's a difference." He studied her face, searching for the catch, the joke, the hidden cruelty. But there was none, just warmth, with something heavier underneath, like she understood what it meant to be wounded in public. "I'm Marcus," he finally said. "Cole, Marcus Cole." "Nice to meet you, Marcus Cole."
She leaned back slightly. "So, tell me about yourself. And please don't give me the job title version. I get that enough." He hesitated. "There's not much to tell. I work nights, I have a son. That's pretty much my whole life." "A son?" Her eyes brightened. "How old?" "5. His name's Nolan. He's—" Marcus smiled without realizing it. "He's everything." "That's beautiful." "What about you?" he asked, then quickly added, "I mean, only if you want to share. I'm not good at this." Adrian laughed softly. "I'm not either. Honestly, most of my conversations are about stock projections and quarterly earnings. It's refreshing to talk about something real." Their wine arrived, followed shortly by the risotto. Marcus took a bite, and his eyes widened. "This is incredible." "Right? I come here for this alone." For the next hour they talked, not about wealth or status, about life, about loss. Adrian shared pieces of her divorce, how her ex-husband had married her for her last name, how the betrayal had made her retreat behind walls so high she forgot what sunlight felt like. She didn't say everything, but Marcus understood. Pain recognizes pain. He told her about Nolan's mother, about the 6 months of chemotherapy, about holding her hand at the end and promising to raise his son with the same grace she had carried. "She sounds remarkable," Adrian said softly. She was. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that forms when two people recognize something familiar in each other.
Eventually, the check came. Adrian took it before Marcus could move. "Please," he said, "let me at least—" "Absolutely not. This was my idea." He exhaled, uncomfortable but grateful. "Then at least let me say thank you. You didn't have to rescue my night." She tilted her head, studying him. "You know what I noticed about you?" "What?" "When she walked away, you didn't crumble, you didn't curse, you just sat there with your head up." She paused. "That's rare, Marcus, that kind of dignity. Most people lose it the moment things get hard." He shrugged, embarrassed. "I have a kid watching, even when he's not there. I can't afford to fall apart." Adrian smiled, a real smile, the kind that lit up her whole face. "Nolan's lucky." "Have you ever met someone who made you feel seen for the first time? Like they looked past every label and found the person hiding underneath?" Marcus had never expected to meet anyone like that, especially not tonight. They parted at the entrance, the cool Denver air swirling between them. "Thank you," Marcus said again, "for everything." "Don't thank me yet." Adrian pulled out a business card and pressed it into his palm. "Call me. I mean it." He looked down at the card, then back at her. "Why?" She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Because I think the universe made a mistake sending you here tonight, and I think maybe I was the correction." Before he could respond, she turned and walked toward a waiting black car. Marcus stood frozen, holding the card like it might disappear. When he finally got home, Nolan was asleep. Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, watching his son breathe. "Buddy, I think something just happened." 3 days passed after the dinner at Carmichael's. Marcus replayed the evening constantly, Adrian's laughter, her honesty, the way she looked at him like he actually mattered. He hadn't called her, not because he didn't want to, but because he couldn't quite believe any of it was real. On Tuesday afternoon, Marcus took Nolan to Bennett Park, a small green space a few blocks from their apartment. It had a rusty swing set, a sandbox that neighborhood cats treated as personal property, and a single wooden bench where Marcus liked to sit while Nolan explored. Today, Nolan had brought his dinosaur collection, 7 plastic figures of varying sizes and ferocity. He arranged them carefully on the bench beside Marcus, narrating an elaborate battle. And then the T-Rex says, "You shall not pass," and the Triceratops is like, "Too bad, I'm passing anyway." Marcus chuckled. "Sounds intense." "It's war, Daddy. War is always intense." A voice came from behind them. "That's a very wise observation." Marcus turned.
Adrian stood a few feet away, dressed casually. Jeans, white blouse, sunglasses pushed up on her head. She looked different outside the restaurant. Softer. Realer. "Adrian?" She smiled. "I was walking through the neighborhood. Saw you two from across the street." She paused. "I hope that's not weird." No, it's..." He stood, suddenly self-conscious. "It's good. This is good." Nolan tugged at Marcus's shirt. "Daddy, who's the lady?" Marcus crouched down. "This is Adrian. She's a friend of Daddy's." Nolan studied her carefully, with the intense scrutiny only children possess. Then his face broke into a grin. "Do you like dinosaurs?" Adrian crouched to his level. "I love dinosaurs, especially the ones with the really long necks." "Brachiosaurus!" Nolan exclaimed. "Exactly." Nolan grabbed her hand without hesitation and pulled her toward the bench. "Come see my collection. I'll introduce you." Adrian laughed, allowing herself to be led. She sat between Nolan and Marcus while the 5-year-old explained the complex social hierarchy of his plastic dinosaurs. "This one's Gerald. He's the leader. And this one's Beatrice. She's mean but secretly nice. And this tiny one is Pickles. He's my favorite because nobody expects him to win, but he always does." Adrian listened with genuine interest. She asked questions. She let Nolan place Pickles in her palm like a sacred offering. Marcus watched, something tightening in his chest. This was the first time since Nolan's mother died that his son had opened up so quickly to anyone. Nolan was usually shy, guarded around new people. He had Mrs. Delgado, and he had Marcus, and that was his entire world. But with Adrian, something was different. After 20 minutes of dinosaur diplomacy, Nolan climbed onto the bench between them and made an announcement. "Daddy?" "Yeah, buddy?" "I want her to stay." Marcus froze. Adrian's breath caught. Nolan looked up at her, completely earnest. "You're nice, and you listen good. Can you be our friend forever?" Adrian blinked, her eyes glistening. She looked at Marcus, then back at Nolan. "I would really like that," she said softly. Nolan grinned triumphantly. "Then it's decided. Pickles agrees too." He placed the tiny dinosaur in Adrian's hand again, as if sealing a sacred contract. They spent another hour at the park. Adrian pushed Nolan on the swings. Marcus stood nearby, watching two people who had been strangers days ago become something more. When it was time to leave, Nolan insisted on hugging Adrian goodbye. "See you soon?" he asked, arms wrapped around her legs. She crouched down, meeting his eyes. "Very soon, I promise." As they walked home, Nolan holding Marcus's hand and chattering about how Adrian was definitely a princess in disguise, Marcus felt something unfamiliar rising in his chest. Hope. Real hope. The kind he'd buried with his wife. But what he didn't know, what none of them knew, was that someone had already noticed Adrian spending time in the wrong part of town, and that someone had questions. What do you think Nolan sees in Adrian that adults miss? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Over the next 2 weeks, Adrian became a fixture in Marcus and Nolan's small world. She showed up at the park with coloring books. She brought takeout from places Marcus couldn't pronounce, let alone afford. She sat on their worn couch and watched cartoons with Nolan like it was the most important programming on television. And slowly, walls came down. One evening, after Nolan had fallen asleep clutching Pickles the dinosaur, Adrian and Marcus sat on the tiny balcony overlooking the parking lot. The city hummed distantly. Stars fought through the light pollution. "Can I tell you something?" Adrian asked quietly. "Anything." She stared at her hands. "My ex-husband, Carter, he was perfect on paper. Harvard MBA, old money family. My father adored him." She paused. "But he didn't marry me. He married Sterling Financial. I was just the access point." Marcus listened without interrupting. "When I found out he'd been sleeping with his assistant for 2 years, he didn't even apologize. He said, Her voice cracked slightly. "He said I should have known that nobody actually loves someone like me. They love what I represent." "That's not true." She looked at him. "You don't know that." "I know enough." Marcus turned to face her fully. "The woman who sits on my floor playing dinosaurs with my son? The one who remembers that Nolan likes his grilled cheese cut diagonally? That's not a title or a bank account. That's just you." Adrian's eyes glistened. "You really see things differently, don't you?" "I see what's real. Everything else is just noise." She reached over and took his hand. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. 2 nights later, Marcus was at Sterling Tower, finishing his shift on the 42nd floor. The building was nearly empty, just security, a few late-working executives, and the ghosts of ambition that never seemed to leave. He was rolling his card toward the elevator when he heard it, a thud, then silence. Marcus moved quickly toward the sound. Near the stairwell entrance, Hector lay crumpled on the ground, clutching his chest, face gray. "Hector!" Marcus dropped to his knees beside him. His eyes were wide with fear. Marcus didn't panic. He pulled out his phone, dialed 911, and put it on speaker. While the dispatcher talked, he loosened Hector's collar, elevated his legs, and kept talking to him in a calm, steady voice. "Stay with me, Hector. You're going to be okay. Help's coming. Just breathe." Paramedics arrived within 7 minutes. They stabilized Hector and loaded him onto a stretcher. One of them looked at Marcus. "You kept him conscious, kept his airway clear. That probably saved his life." Marcus just nodded as they wheeled Hector away. He didn't know Adrian had arrived for a late meeting with her father's CFO. He didn't know she had witnessed everything from the hallway. But she had. She watched the janitor save a man's life with nothing but presence and calm, no hesitation, no expectation of reward. When the paramedics left, she walked toward him. "Marcus." He turned, surprised. "Adrian? What are you doing here?" "I saw what you just did." He shrugged. "Hector's a good man. Anyone would have helped." "No." She stepped closer. "Not anyone. You." She took his hand right there in the fluorescent-lit hallway and held it tightly. "You keep showing me who you are, and every time it's more than I expected." Marcus didn't have words, so he just held her hand back. But from across the lobby, through the glass doors of his corner office, someone else was watching. Victor Sterling stood silhouetted against the city lights, arms crossed, expression unreadable. He had seen his daughter holding hands with the janitor, and he had questions. The following Monday, Marcus arrived at Sterling Tower to find a strange tension in the air. People whispered as he passed. Eyes followed him. Someone on the 14th floor laughed too loudly, then stopped abruptly when they saw him. He didn't understand until he reached the break room. There, taped to the refrigerator, was a printed screenshot from a group chat. The messages were clear. Garrett Nash. LOL, he actually showed up in a funeral blazer. Devin Price. The look on his face when she walked out, dead. Tyler Mack. Best prank we've ever pulled. Dude had no idea. Below the messages was a photo. Marcus, sitting alone at Carmichael's, staring at the empty chair across from him. His chest tightened. So that was it. The whole thing. The nomination, the mystery admirer, the dinner. All of it had been designed to humiliate him. And now everyone knew. Marcus reached up, pulled the paper from the refrigerator, and folded it quietly. He tucked it into his pocket without a word. Someone nearby muttered, "Shouldn't have aimed so high, janitor." Marcus paused. For a moment, the room held its breath. Then he exhaled, nodded once, and walked out. He didn't yell, didn't curse, didn't give them the satisfaction. That evening, Adrian found out. One of her father's assistants forwarded the chat screenshot to her. Out of concern or gossip, she couldn't tell. But as she read it, her hands trembled. The dinner hadn't been fate. It had been cruelty. She called Marcus immediately. "I just saw it," she said, voice shaking. "Marcus, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." "I know you didn't. How are you so calm?
They humiliated you. They planned it. They tried to. He paused. But that night, you sat down. You stayed. And that changed everything. Adrian was silent for a long moment. When she spoke again, her voice was steady. I'm going to deal with this. You don't have to. Yes, I do. The next morning, Garrett Nash, Devin Price, and Tyler Mack were called into HR. By noon, all three had been terminated. Official reason: harassment and conduct unbecoming of Sterling Financial employees. Unofficial reason: Adrian Sterling made one phone call. By evening, the entire building knew. The janitor they mocked had connections they never imagined. But more importantly, they learned something else. He hadn't needed those connections to stand tall. He'd done that on his own. If this story is touching your heart, that subscribe button is waiting for you. Marcus received a text that night from Adrian. They're gone, all three. He replied simply, "Thank you, but you didn't have to." Her response came immediately. "Yes, I did, because you would have forgiven them, and they didn't deserve it." Marcus smiled at his phone, sitting on the edge of Nolan's bed. The boy stirred. "Daddy, who's texting you?" "A friend, buddy." Nolan smiled sleepily. "The princess?" "Yeah." Marcus tucked the blanket tighter. "The princess." But not everyone was ready to celebrate. Victor Sterling had watched his daughter's involvement from a distance, the phone calls, the HR meeting, the way she defended a man who mopped floors for a living. And now he was done watching.
Marcus was waxing the lobby floor at 11 p.m. when the elevator doors opened and Victor Sterling stepped out. There was no entourage, no assistant, just the CEO himself, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than Marcus earned in 3 months. Marcus straightened slowly, gripping his mop. "Mr. Sterling." Victor walked toward him, each step deliberate. He stopped 5 feet away, hands clasped behind his back. "You're the janitor my daughter has been spending time with." "Yes, sir." Victor studied him the way a predator studies prey, calculating, patient. "I've done my research on you, Mr. Cole. Widower, 1 child, no savings to speak of, living in a 2-bedroom apartment in Montclair." He paused. "You're not exactly what I envisioned for Adrian." Marcus met his gaze. "I never envisioned it either, sir." "Then we agree on something." "With respect, Mr. Sterling, I don't think we do." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" Marcus set the mop aside. "You see a janitor, a man with no status, no wealth, no future that looks impressive on paper, and you've already decided I'm a threat. Aren't you?" "No, I'm just a man trying to raise his son right and treat people with dignity." He paused. "Including your daughter." Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping to ice. "My daughter has been through enough. She was married to a man who used her, humiliated her, and left her broken. I will not watch her make another mistake. I'm not him." "You're right. He had money. He had status. He had a future." Victor's jaw tightened. "What do you have?" Marcus was silent for a long moment. "I have a boy who prays every night for me to find happiness. I have hands that know how to work and a heart that knows how to stay. And I have enough self-respect not to pretend I'm something I'm not." Victor stared at him. "Stay away from my daughter," he said finally, "or I will make your life very difficult." He turned and walked back toward the elevator. The doors opened, he stepped inside, and they closed without another word. Marcus stood alone in the gleaming lobby, heart pounding. For the first time in years, he felt afraid. Not of Victor Sterling, but of losing what he had just begun to hope for. Will Adrian choose the janitor over her father's empire? The next chapter will reveal everything.
Victor Sterling was not a man who second-guessed himself. He had built a financial empire through certainty, through decisions made quickly and never revisited.
He trusted his instincts. They had rarely failed him. So when his daughter called the next day, furious about his late-night confrontation with Marcus, he felt justified. "You had no right," Adrian said, her voice sharp through the phone. "I have every right. I'm your father. You threatened him. I protected you. From what?" she demanded. "From someone who actually treats me like a person? From someone who's kind and honest and real?" Victor sighed heavily. "You're blinded by—" "I'm not blind. For the first time in years, I actually see clearly." She paused. "And if you can't respect that, then maybe you're the one who can't see." She hung up. Victor sat in his office, staring at the phone. The silence felt heavier than any boardroom negotiation. He didn't call back. He didn't send a message. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in years. He decided to watch. Saturday morning, Victor sat in his car across the street from Bennett Park, sunglasses on, window cracked, invisible to anyone who might glance his way. He watched Marcus arrive holding his son's hand. The boy, Nolan, his file said, was chattering endlessly, clutching a small plastic dinosaur. They sat on a bench. Marcus pulled out a brown paper bag and handed Nolan a sandwich. The boy ate happily, swinging his legs, occasionally holding up the dinosaur for his father to acknowledge. Victor watched Marcus laugh, watched him wipe mustard from the boy's cheek, watched him crouch down to tie Nolan's loose shoelace with the kind of patience that couldn't be faked. Then something happened. An older woman nearby tripped on a raised tree root. She fell hard, groceries scattering across the path. Marcus was there in seconds. He helped her up gently, asked if she was okay, gathered every item she'd dropped. When she tried to thank him, he simply smiled and waved it off. Nolan, meanwhile, had walked over and offered the woman his dinosaur. "Pickles makes people feel better," the boy said solemnly. The woman laughed, touched, and handed Pickles back with exaggerated gratitude. Victor watched Marcus pick up his son, kiss his forehead, and settle back onto the bench as if nothing remarkable had happened. But it was remarkable. It was everything Victor had wanted for Adrian, someone who acted with integrity when no one was watching. Except someone was watching, and what Victor saw broke something open inside him. He didn't approach them, not yet, but he sat in that car for another hour, watching a father and son share sandwiches and sunshine. And he remembered something his own father once told him. The measure of a man isn't what he has, it's what he gives when he has nothing to spare. Marcus Cole had almost nothing, and yet he gave everything. What did Victor witness that finally changed his heart? Stay with us to find out. 1 week later, Marcus received a message that made no sense. "Please come to Sterling Tower, 6 p.m., Conference Room A, 42nd floor, V. Sterling." He stared at the text for 5 full minutes. This was either an apology or an ambush. Given their last conversation, he expected the latter. But Marcus Cole didn't run from hard things. At 5:55 p.m., he stepped off the elevator on the 42nd floor. His work uniform had been traded for the same Goodwill blazer he'd worn to Carmichael's, pressed again, thread still loose but clean. The conference room doors were open. Inside, Victor Sterling sat at the head of a long mahogany table. No lawyers, no assistants, just him. And beside him stood Adrienne. Marcus hesitated at the door. "Come in," Victor said. His voice was different, less sharp, more tired. Marcus entered slowly, glancing at Adrienne. She gave him a small nod. Victor gestured to a chair. "Please, sit." Marcus sat. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then Victor exhaled heavily and leaned forward. "I owe you an apology." Marcus blinked. "Sir?" "I misjudged you.
I made assumptions based on your circumstances rather than your character." He paused. "I watched you last Saturday at the park with your son." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You followed me?" "I observed. There's a difference." Victor almost smiled. "I saw you help a stranger who fell. I saw your boy offer his toy to make her feel better. I saw the way you treat your son, the patience, the love, the presence." He stood, walking toward the window. "I've spent 40 years building something I thought would protect my daughter. Money, power, walls." He turned back. "But walls keep out the wrong things. I understand that now." Adrienne moved to stand beside Marcus. She took his hand. Victor looked at them, at his daughter's fingers intertwined with the janitor's, and nodded slowly. "Sterling Financial is launching a new initiative, a workforce development program for single parents. We'll provide job training, childcare support, and career placement." He looked directly at Marcus. "You." "Me? You know what these families face. You've lived it, and you treat people with a dignity that can't be taught." Victor extended his hand. "What do you say?" Marcus stood. He shook Victor Sterling's hand firmly. "I say yes, for Nolan, for families like ours." Victor smiled, a real smile, maybe the first in years. Adrienne squeezed Marcus's other hand, her eyes shining. "There's one more thing," she said softly. She turned to face her father fully, her voice clear and unwavering. "I want him." Victor raised an eyebrow. "Not because he saved anyone, not because of this program, not because you finally approve." She looked at Marcus. "Because he's good, because he stayed when anyone else would have left, because Nolan prays for him to be happy, and I want to be the answer to that prayer." The room fell silent. Victor looked at his daughter, then at Marcus, and for the first time he didn't see a janitor. He saw family. "Then I suppose," Victor said slowly, "we should have dinner soon, all of us, Nolan included." Marcus laughed, a surprised, joyful sound. "He'll want dinosaur chicken nuggets." "Then dinosaur chicken nuggets it is."
3 months later. The Sterling Foundation Single Parent Initiative launched to national coverage. Marcus stood at the podium, Nolan sitting proudly in the front row beside Adrienne. "When I started at Sterling Tower," Marcus said, "I was invisible, just the guy with the mop. But someone saw me anyway. Someone sat down when everyone else walked away." He looked at Adrienne. She wiped her eyes. "This program isn't about charity. It's about dignity. It's about giving people the chance to be seen for who they really are." The audience applauded. Nolan stood on his chair and cheered. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed, Nolan tugged on Adrienne's dress. "Are you staying forever now?" he asked. She crouched down, meeting his eyes. "If you'll have me." Nolan grinned. "Pickles agrees." He pressed the tiny dinosaur into her palm just like he had in the park all those months ago. Marcus watched them, his son and the woman who had chosen them both, and felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in 3 long years. Complete. Love doesn't check your resume. It finds you when you least expect it and stays when you need it most. If you believe that, subscribe to Tales from the Rainbow Heart and share this story with someone who needs to hear it.